This pandemic has turned a lot of things upside down, including unemployment. Today, we hear from a top university about the class of 2020, what are recent grads experiencing, and how do businesses find and hire them. I'm Lisa Ellen Smith, and this is Focus on Business. Rob Fowler and Brian Calley are back from the Small Business Association of Michigan with updates on the latest in Michigan business news. We also have Karin Hanson, the Director of Employer Relations and Communications at Michigan State University Career Services Network, with resources for hiring graduates from one of Michigan's top universities. We also have more news. Rob, let's get started with what's happening in the news with Governor Whitmer. She's extended her executive order. What's going on there?
Well, thank you, Lisa. The original executive order was extended this week. The original order would have expired May 28th. Was extended to June 12th. That will make 81 days of stay home, stay safe executive order if it isn't extended further. So I think in a practical sense, stay home, stay safe order really speaks to people, to citizens, that you need to stay home to stay safe. And it says to businesses, you can't require people to come to work unless you are in these types of businesses. So sort of has taken this exception. And since the original order, a couple of things have happened. There has been a sort of regionality to it, meaning I think we suspected this would happen. Now we've begun to see it. That is, some regions are going to open up a little quicker than others. So just before the Memorial Day weekend, regions 6 and 8, which actually is the Upper Peninsula and the tip of the Mitt in Michigan, the counties right around the tip, were allowed to open restaurants and bars at half capacity. But downstate, the rest of the state has not been allowed to do that. So you're going to see some opening up, a region at a time, an industry at a time, most probably. I think that looks like the way it's going to happen. And so currently in our state, the sort of public accommodations have been pulled apart a little bit. So the executive order talked about bars and restaurants in northern Michigan. And yet gyms and salons and spas are not really allowed to open yet in certain cases. I think it's going to be really interesting to see under what circumstances those very, haircuts, salons are going to be able to open. And at least for the rest of Michigan, that is not possible yet, at least not until after June the 12th. So bars, restaurants, gyms, spas, not available until June 12th was the news this past week.
Yeah, I was hearing stories about how businesses were opening up, and it's feeling like it's an exciting and scary time. We as we know more about who has had COVID and who is immune from that infection, I think that's going to really turn the conversation about work. So that I'm trying to dovetail here into there's more testing available, because if and when you have had it, that you're going to be immune for some period of time. So testing has changed. What have you heard about that?
Well, I think one of the indicators all along for reopening the economy has been early on the capacity of our hospitals to deal with COVID patients, and a little bit later, the capacity of our healthcare system to test. And now we seem to have widespread testing capacity. I think this is going to matter, since this is called Focus on Business. I think this is going to matter to businesses because some of the best practice recommendations have been that employers will need to post in their in their businesses testing facilities or access to testing. So you'll have to know as an employer where your employees could go to be tested, where you could go to be tested, and make that available to your employees. So the more widespread the testing becomes, the more sort of institutionalized it becomes. Hospitals and clinics and federally qualified health centers and others who are doing those testing, we're going to need to become familiar with them, so that if someone is suspected of having COVID, or if somebody has been traveling or other things that would cause them to need to be tested, you're going to need to be able to tell them where to go to receive that test. So the good news is the capacity has increased pretty broadly, and it's been one of the conditions of opening up the economy. It doesn't seem like it's going to be something that's going to keep us from opening more quickly.
Well, that's
one
good.
thing to point out, though, Lisa, is that there's actually a couple different types of tests. So, as you saw the overall expansion in testing that the government is and the governor had made available through some executive orders, it's really about the testing for a current active infection. So am I currently right now real time COVID-19 positive? So that's the part of the testing for tracking the disease and who has it and who should be going into work, and when you have to do contact tracing and all that sort of thing. There's another type of testing, which is testing for antibodies that would tell you that at some point in the past, you used to be COVID-19 positive, but you are no longer. So when it comes to having going into a healthcare system, being tested, having it be an insurance claim and your insurance paying for it, that's for the question, am I currently COVID-19 positive right now? The antibody testing, which is something that's a pretty good indication usually that a person can't be reinfected, that's also becoming more widespread available. And it's something that's offered by the healthcare system. But usually very often this can be an out-of-pocket expense for a person. That's not a healthcare thing, and it's certainly not part of what the government has, and through their executive orders, the state through the executive orders has expanded the eligibility criteria for. So both types of tests are becoming much, much more widespread available, but they're very different in their purposes. And one is for healthcare management, and the one is just to let you know if you had it at some point in the past, but really doesn't serve a current healthcare purpose.
Well, that is a very helpful distinction. I think it's going to be really helpful for someone to know if they have had COVID, but it's certainly understandable that you want to know if you have it right now, too, if you're working with lots of other people in an office. So thanks for that. I want to talk about some other things that are happening in the world. We're starting to see some fraud pop up, Brian. So if you could talk to us about, there's some unemployment fraud that's popping up. What's happening with that?
Well, we're seeing all across the country now that there are people. In fact, I've seen some speculation that it's widespread organized crime in that people are getting and finding identities of others and filing fraudulent unemployment claims, and then attaching the payment source back to their account, and maybe something offshore, or maybe something onshore, to see how far they can get. And so if you have an employer, a lot of employers right now, they're not in the office. They might get a notice like, hey, here are some employees that have filed for unemployment. They might be current employees that are not laid off. And so what's happened is somebody has stolen their identity and filed for unemployment, attached it to their bank account, and just wants to see how many of these weekly $963 payments that they could receive. Now, I've actually currently got some experience in this, because somebody took my identity and fraudulently filed unemployment. And so what happened was, I got a notice in the mail that happened, And also the Small Business Association of Michigan got a notice that it happened. So we caught it. But if I wasn't up on my mail and, or let's say the Small Business Association of Michigan, if there was in a situation where the office is totally locked down and people weren't picking up the mail, it may not have been caught for a few weeks and, or longer, who knows? And, especially for those who, maybe have totally shut down their operations, they might be particularly vulnerable for this. So I think the moral to the story is make sure and check your mail on a regular basis to ensure that both your employees and the employer itself are protected from this type of fraud. And unfortunately, every time a new benefit like this comes out, there are people out there who will take advantage of it and do things to steal. Essentially, is what this is, and commit fraud. So be aware.
Yeah, sounds like sort of a perfect storm. All communications are different, habits are different, and lots of folks are not where they normally are. So yeah, thanks for that update. I appreciate it. I have to say too, just looking at you, Brian, that you look a little clean shaven today. I know last week, and I've kind of been poking fun at you for weeks now about starting to look like a woolly bear a little bit, but you look great. Glad to see that.
Yeah, it's summertime in Michigan, and it was getting, the beard was getting very, very itchy. So I'm actually pleased to go back to my more classic look of being clean shaven. Although my youngest daughter, she didn't like the beard at all. And then after I shaved it, she's like, I don't like it. So it's like, what gives? She didn't like me with or without it, but she'll get used to it.
Well, I'm sure she likes you very well. Hey, we've got a special guest today, Karin Hanson from Michigan State University. Karin, you are a 17-year veteran of helping Michigan State University students succeed in their careers. This is a very interesting topic for small businesses. We came into this pandemic with very low unemployment, very tight labor market. Everybody was competing for talent. Everybody was talking about how do we retain who we have. And so things have changed. It's really a complete flip-flop. We've gone on our heads on this one to now we have the highest unemployment rate that we have had in a long, long time. So we just graduated the class of 2020 from Michigan State University. Congratulations to all the grads out there. So how are these grads faring for jobs right now? What are you seeing?
Well, that's a great question. We are actually, our students that have just graduated, we found they've broken into 3 different categories as we look at how this new situation is impacting them. The first category are those who unfortunately had their offers rescinded. A lot of offers are made to students in early to late fall, prior to the year that they're graduating. And employers were finding that they could no longer keep those offers. So that did happen to some of our students. The second group of students that the graduating seniors fell into would be those whose employers have said, just hold off and wait. We still have a job for you, but we're just not quite sure when that might start. At first they were thinking maybe mid-May, then they thought perhaps that could still happen. Then it was mid-June. Now we're hearing July or perhaps August. And those students are getting a little bit nervous, but I think that as long as the employers have constant communication with them, the students think, hey, quite frankly, this might be some extra time that I might have off. This is a little bit of a gap. And so they're not quite as worried. And then there's a third group. And the third group were the group of students who truly were looking to be hired by employers who hire just in time. A lot of our employers do hire just in time. A lot of small businesses hire just in time, quite frankly, because we're going to start looking for someone in April to start in May. And that's the nature of the markets that they're in. Those are the students that are the new grads that are having the toughest time because they didn't have that offer. Maybe they were holding off on their job search until things were getting a little bit closer to graduation. So we held 3 career fairs this spring semester virtually. After we went working from home and the students were off campus, which helped a little, but we're working quite a bit with our young alumni now to help them network virtually and to teach them new virtual job seeking techniques that we're quite frankly all getting a lot better at as we move along.
Well, that could be good news for small business. That could be a really nice partnership. Things are going to be opening up, and if it is, if everything is rosy and bright and we really can get back to business, then there's talent out there to be talking to right now. So how, if I'm an owner or an HR manager, how would I tap into the Michigan State University pool of grads?
Great question. We are obviously a huge university, and many employers might feel intimidated or overwhelmed by trying to navigate all the different colleges and all the different programs that we have to offer. But that's what's nice about working with the Career Services Network at Michigan State. We truly are a network. We work across campus and every single college and have great contact with the graduating students, the young alumni, as well as the faculty within each college across campus. So all the employers need to do is reach out to us, email, phone call. All the mainline calls are coming to my cell right now, so give me a call. Look forward to it. And be more than happy to get you connected in terms of setting up a plan that works for you and connecting you with the right recent grads that would fit what you're looking for. So we're here for you.
That is an amazing service that you're providing there. We have had relationships with lots of different universities, and I have to say Michigan State's a great one. Thank you for all of your work and for helping all those students out there and business owners get connected. And yes, there's a couple of other things we want to get to today. There's some new legislation out there. The Paycheck Protection Flexbility Act. Brian, can you clue us in? What's going on there?
We saw Congress in Washington take up a bill, a proposal, which would add in some additional flexibility to the Paycheck Protection Program. And this is something that we were looking to see happen, which is to expand the amount of time that a business has to expend the Paycheck Protection Program dollars and still have the loan itself be forgiven. Right now, what it says is that you have to, anything that you spend in that first 8 weeks after loan origination is fully forgivable. In other words, you don't have to pay the loan back. But with a lot of businesses that aren't green lighted to open yet, or maybe they can open but at reduced capacity, what they're looking for, those businesses are looking for, is to be able to match up the Paycheck Protection Program dollars with the reopening process of their business. And when Congress first set up this program, I don't think that they really anticipated that the shutdowns would last as long as they are lasting. And so there has been a willingness to consider and to debate, propose changes. So that has now passed the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. So this is not law yet. It hasn't gone through the Senate. It has not hit the president's desk. But it is a very good sign that they're looking at adding in additional flexibility to the Paycheck Protection Program. So the forgiveness period is one of those big changes. Another one of the big changes that is being contemplated and proposed moving through the process is the controls they have on what you can spend the money on. So right now it says 75% has to be spent on payroll, and the other and up to 25% of the proceeds can go toward rent, utilities, or debt interest. That works for a lot of businesses, but unfortunately, there are a lot of businesses it doesn't work for. If their overhead costs and compared to their payroll just don't match up in that ratio, then they need additional flexibility as well. So those are a couple of the things that are included in that. And so as we work to refine the language and make sure that there's not any unintended consequences or problems with it, we're hopeful that additional flexibility will make it to the president's desk in time for some of our businesses to take advantage of it.
And we will keep people posted on that. Rob, I don't mean to blindside you here, but there was an earlier conversation that you were having about the number of Michigan businesses that have actually gotten a Paycheck Protection Program loan. Are you prepared to speak about that?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, actually, to Brian's point, there are 113,000 Michigan businesses who have received the Paycheck Protection Program. $15.7 billion worth of those PPP loans that everyone hopes is converted to a grant. And the flexibility he's just talking about is, for companies who already have this loan to make it forgivable. And so while we're flying the plane, the Congress is working on the wings of it, which is a little unsettling for a lot of small businesses. But the flexibility would be welcome. It's just that it's not guaranteed, and so you have to behave as if it's not coming. So that's really been the trick for a lot of business owners.
So there wasn't there an unintended consequence of this potential bill also, where I think you were talking about that earlier, Brian?
Yeah, one of the concerns is that they don't inadvertently put additional restrictions as they move out the forgiveness period to perhaps as long as 24 weeks, that they don't require that employment be maintained for all of those 24 weeks, because naturally it's with just 8 weeks of support, that's not something a business would be able to guarantee.
Well, as I promised, we'll keep our eye on it. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Many of us have been very fortunate during this pandemic to be able to work from home, but with this distributed workforce comes some challenges. One of those challenges is to stay connected to our staff, our colleagues, our customers, and we've got traditional tools that we've been using: texting, video chatting, email, although that's not, in my opinion, a very great tool to stay connected. It's just this back and forth day-long conversation sometimes. So one of the tools that I think is often overlooked in our manager's toolkit is polling or surveys. And we don't do it because it's hard. It's like that's something a professional does, but we as a normal small business manager overlook it. It requires typically some type of a service like a SurveyMonkey or Google Sheets or a form stack, and we don't want to pay for that service because we don't know the value and we've just never been exposed to it very much. So I'm going to suggest to you a better way to do it: surveys that come with a tool that is already probably inside your Microsoft Office 365 environment. If you have normal business licensing, it's included in there, and most people don't know about it. It's called Microsoft Forms. It's an extremely easy tool to use to create surveys, polls, forms. When I say a survey or a poll, it could just be one simple question. How are you feeling today? What's your mental state today, on a scale of 1 to 10 with little stars, and people can click on that star and click submit, and now you've got a good pulse on your staff. If you're trying to get some information from your customers, how are you handling this pandemic? What can I do in my business to help you get through this thing? So come up with 2, 3, 4 questions and send it out as a poll to your customers. The tool itself is extremely easy to use, as I said, to create simple questions with either text responses or checkboxes or radio buttons. There can be some branching, lots of options. Looks beautiful when it comes out. It works for the user that's getting the survey. They can do it on their phone. They can do it inside their, on their computer. Answer the questions, send it back. You, as the form owner, get to see all the responses. You can send it out in an Excel spreadsheet or look at individual responses. It comes with graphing capabilities. So, just the whole 9 yards. And guess what? It's already inside your Office 365 environment. So take advantage of that. Use polling, use surveys instead of the traditional chatting and those types of things, to get a good pulse on your staff, your colleagues, and most importantly, your customers. And if you can't find it or need some help, need some more information about Microsoft Forms, or maybe it's not included already inside your license plan, find us on the web, www.makingtecheasy.com.
Focus on Tech, brought to you by Providence, making technology easier.
Denise Policella for Focus on Legal. If you have an employee that informs you they've tested positive for COVID-19, don't panic. It's going to happen to most of us eventually. But there are 4 things that you should do at this time to protect yourself legally. The first is, of course, talking to the employee. He or she needs to stay home and in isolation until they're cleared by their county health department to come back to work. Make sure that you reassure the employee they will not be disciplined or discharged or retaliated against for informing you of their status, and follow this up in writing and put it in their medical employment file. You also need to inform your staff that they have a coworker that has contracted the coronavirus so that they can do their own assessment of whether they have been in close contact with this person. And if they have, they are going to also need to quarantine until such time as it's been determined according to current guidelines whether or not they can come back to work. Also, you should probably tell them to keep the name of the person confidential, just for privacy concerns. You also need to inform all of your customers. This can be through a press release, an email, a text blast. Let them know what's happened and let them know what you're doing to clean and remediate and protect them, because they will be engendered with a sense of confidence in your services and in your company, that their safety is top of mind and your first priority. And this may include, if you haven't been involuntarily closed, closing voluntarily for a day just to do a deep, thorough cleaning. And this will also give them a sense of confidence that their safety is your first priority. And then finally, if you're a licensed or regulated business, definitely inform your licensed administrators or your regulators of what's happened so that you've self-reported, which is always the best thing, and that you can follow any additional guidelines that they have for you before you are allowed to resume business. Also, remember, always consult with a licensed attorney and stay safe and healthy.
Focus on Law, brought to you by Policella and Associates, PLLC.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next Sunday.